We're back. Can I get a motion to return back to public session?
Move.
Can I get a second? Thank you. All right. Opening statement. Meetings of the board are open to the public and all members of the community should feel free to participate. There are two opportunities for the public to speak. The first is at the beginning of the meeting for agenda items only, and the second is at the end of the meeting for other items. Any individual desiring to speak shall give his or her name, address, and the group, if any, that is represented. Presentation shall be as brief as possible, but no more than 3 minutes per individual. There are certain matters that may be brought before the board that cannot be immediately addressed to public. Such matters may be referred by the president to a board committee and or to the superintendent for consideration and or resolution. The board vests in its president or other presiding officer authority to terminate the remarks of any individual if he or she deems it in the best interest of those present to do so. Roll call.
Mr. Reddy.
Here.
Mr. Wall. Here. Mrs. Briamonte.
Here.
Mrs. Zhang. Absent. Dr. Kalur.
Here.
Mrs. Tassila.
Here.
Mr. Buckley. Here. Mr. Damari. Here. Mr. Mann. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Can we stand for flag salute? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, for everyone out in public land and for our audience, tonight is basically the not to exceed budget. So that's the only presentation we have tonight. So Dr. Cascone and our board administrator, Mr. Patrizio, want to go up and do their presentation?
Thank you, Mr. President.
No problem.
All right, good evening, President Ray, Vice President Wall, members of the board, administration, community members in attendance tonight. Pleased tonight to be presenting with District Business Administrator, Mr. Patrizio, on the 2023-24 preliminary budget. Just want to start off by sharing the objectives for tonight's presentation in broad brushstrokes. The first is to really help the board and the public understand what is the preliminary budget, what's its significance, and also what are the steps that follow the prospective approval of the preliminary budget by the board after this evening, and then leading up to the public hearing of the final budget in May. It's obviously also to share, oh, I forgot to mention my the student liaisons, the student representatives. Good evening. Also to share highlights of items, obviously, which will be funded by this budget, as well as share the budgetary goals and the challenges that have come with the development of this budget, to share projected revenues, expenses, and tax implications. Presentation on a budget really needs to begin with a review of the district's mission statement. And while I won't read it word for word, I think it's an important starting point, because everything we do over the course of developing a budget always comes back to our mission statement. The budget is developed and designed in order that as a school district, as a Board of Education administration, we can continue to execute successfully the mission statement which we have set before us. And I'll just tease out a few words which I think you can connect meaning to over the course of this presentation. We talk about the idea of being comprehensive, talk about the idea of being caring, talk about partnerships, talk about exceeding, not simply meeting, but exceeding. And then, of course, the end game when our students leave us, that they are not only responsible, but also resourceful and lifelong learners, an ambitious but important mission. Homedale Public Schools has a long and rich tradition of putting together a schooling experience for our students that seeks to address the holistic needs of our students, and understanding that by addressing students' academic needs, by also providing them with robust offerings for their artistic and athletic pursuits, ultimately, theoretically, will lead to the development of students that are socially and emotionally well and well adjusted, because we know, as all people, when we're socially and emotionally well and well adjusted, we can live our best lives and achieve at our highest levels. And Homedale has continued in a number of ways and measures and indicators to demonstrate excellence. It is, quite frankly, a school district that is on a upward trajectory. A number of evidences of these statements are being ranked number 1 by niche.com in terms of school districts in Monmouth County, number 16 out of 243 K through 12 school districts in the state, and in the 92nd percentile of all out of 17,000 high schools in the United States, and moving upwards, up 6 spots on those rankings of the New Jersey schools in the U.S. News and World Report rankings. In the spring administration of the New Jersey Student Learning Assessment, we outperformed the DFG in both mathematics and language arts. Our SAT scores are 140 points above the New Jersey average and are consistently above 1220. And over 78% of our students scored 3 or higher on any one of the 27 AP offerings of Homedale High School. These achievements contribute to what we see as a high level of post-secondary success and admission. When we look at the prestigious institutions of higher learning to which our students gain admission and acceptance, they are some of the finest institutions in the country. And 85% of our students finish college in 4 years. This is almost 3 times the national average. Anecdotally, when our students come back and share feedback with us, whether it's on our alumni panel speaking with our seniors, a consistent piece of feedback that they give to us is that how well Homedale High School prepared them academically for college. All factors and achievements that this board, that this community should be very proud of, and which is very much connected to the funding and the budget that this school district passes on an annual basis. One of the things, speaking along these lines, notwithstanding the many accolades and high quality programs our district offers, we have seen a trend over the course of the last number of years where we have students who are choosing not to come to Homedale High School, but rather one of the vocational schools. In fact, presently we have 127 students, grades 9 through 12, that attend our vocational schools. In addition to obviously wanting to retain these bright students in our schools, in our high school, this also comes at a cost of approximately $1 million to our school district in the form of tuition and transportation. And just to put that number in perspective for you, the revenue that is generated through a 2% tax levy, which is the maximum that a district can levy, is $1.1 million. So we are in essence expending what amounts to a full tax levy simply on the tuition and transportation costs for the students that we're sending to VOTEX. This was a priority for the board when I came in. It continued to be a priority for the board and for the administration. And we're really happy with some of the early reads that we've gotten based upon some of the steps we've taken. In fact, last year we had 80 8th grade students apply to the VOTEX with 35 gaining admissions. And this year that number of applications dropped to 28, decreasing by 52 applications. So not only do we stand to retain many more of our students, but this also would represent a significant financial efficiency for the district, which unfortunately we can't figure into this preliminary budget because we won't have those figures. But the good news is we will before the final budget is approved in May, and that could be a savings of up to $100,000 or more that can be applied to the final budget. I'm going to pass the microphone off to Mr. Patrizzo. He's going to talk about the significance, the meaning of this preliminary budget and some of the steps. Mr. Patrizzo.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Casco, and good evening, everyone. So thought it was important to, further explain, as Dr. Cascona was mentioning, what this step is. It's a preliminary budget or not to exceed. What that means is exactly that. We're just establishing the most amount or the maximum amount from a tax levy perspective. It's important to note is this is a very detailed process. We start in November. Our administrators work with our faculty to get their input on supplies and resource materials. They work on their budgets. We review them towards the end of the calendar year. We meet again when we come back in the new school year, January timeframe, and we continue to work on this budget right up through until the end of February. We don't get state aid numbers. That is basically the last piece of the puzzle, so to speak, until within 48 hours of the governor's budget address. This year, it was provided on February 28th, and the state aid numbers are released on March 2nd. The other thing that's important to note is this is just authorizing, this step right here is just authorizing the submission to the county office. That process is really a detailed process that we can't move forward until we get that approval by the state. And it's a very detailed review and a pretty cumbersome process. So when we come out of that process and we do have the approval, it is a big statement to realize that approval. So we're not there yet. All we're doing right now is just providing it. The board is authorizing that submission, and then we will come back with a formal adoption. As Dr. Cascone mentioned, we are still working on this budget. We're working, administration, the board is still working. And if there are opportunities from this point until when we plan to have our public hearing, which is for May 3rd, we will certainly look to realize continued efficiencies. And again, from now to when we have our public hearing, the tax levy is not going to go up, it can only go down. We thought it was important to give a historical perspective as far as where we've been at from a tax levy increase. You start with the 17-18 year because it was a very important year in this community. It was when the community supported a $40.3 million referendum in the September 2017 special election. And that following year, as you see in 18-19, we had a 2.1% increase. That was primarily as a result of the 2018 bonds that were issued as a result of the successful referendum with the special election in September of 2017. One of the elements that we were planning for and made some improvements to first phase was getting ready for a full day kindergarten program and implementation. So when you look at the 19-20 tax levy increase of 2.96%, that was also planned because that was the implementation of the full year kindergarten program, and that was to account for the new staff that we had to hire as a result of that implementation, thus the 2.96% increase. And then you see the remaining years in 2021, we were at 1.8%, 21-22, we had a tax levy decrease of 0.42%, and this current year we had another tax levy decrease of 0.29%. It's important to note, and we'll give that aggregate total when we talk a little bit further about the current year tax levy, but the two previous years that we came off of tax levy decreases is really unheard of. I got to mention, when we go through this process and when we were submitting these budgets in the county office, that was met with a lot of discussion that we had to provide, putting forth budgets with tax levy decreases. We believed, and as we said to the state through the county office, was what we were able to do that really for two key reasons. We saw the results of the state at the time decreasing health benefit rates or premiums, and then we saw increases in state aid. You may have heard about this S2 new funding formula. A lot of districts currently are seeing decreases. Well, we've realized increases because we've been underfunded for many years. So those were the two elements for the last 2 years why we were able to put forth tax levy decrease. It was a combination of increases in state aid and decrease in health benefit specifically in health benefits and the premium decreases. And we took that, while we were still investing in instruction, we also took that opportunity to invest back in the community with tax relief. The result of that is generating bank cap, and we entered into this budget module. We'll talk a little bit more about bank cap, but we entered this budget year with $3 million of bank cap, which is a significant amount of money. And all that means is that's how much we were under cap with previous years' budgets going forward and going into this year.
And just to add a little bit of additional perspective on that is I think it's important to realize that for approximately the last 10 years, the public school districts have been obliged to really operate within an efficiency model. And that really came into play when the legislation was put in place under Governor Christie's administration that capped school district budgets at 2%. Expenses typically, and since that time, have always gone up more than 2%. So school district budgeting since that time has always been a matter of how do we close deficits while at the same time continuing to enhance and improve and expand. And I think when you go back to that tax levy history, I think it's actually really remarkable what's been done, by this board, this administration, prior, and I would tell you is fairly unusual. It's absolutely not the common way of going about it is that with the exception of those 2 years when it was above 2%, and as Mr. Patrizio explained, there were some fairly significant reasons for that. They've managed to keep it under 2% while building and enhancing, and that's a tremendous accomplishment, even amidst challenging budget years where expenses were going up more than 2%. So in terms of this year, we always start with our goals in terms of what we're trying to accomplish through our budget. Obviously, we want to continue to ensure that our schools are safe, well-run, and well-maintained. We also want to attract more students to remain in Homedale for their high school education. And we want to maintain and accelerate Homedale Public Schools' current upward ranking trajectory, supporting opportunities for students, not only intellectual, but social, emotional growth and well-being continues to be an important focus during this time and during this era. And of course, obviously, maximizing the community's investment. Also, and last but not least, is really providing our staff with the tools and supplies that they need in order to deliver a high quality curriculum that not only meets the New Jersey Student Learning Standards, but exceeds them as well.
Okay, so some of the challenges, we've been talking about the first two since we realized the results of securing the current year transportation. So this current year was it was challenging for all districts, to say the least, to just secure transportation. There were many districts that were not able to, even when the doors opened in September, to have all their routes covered. We were able to do that, fortunately, due to the tremendous efforts of our transportation department. Mrs. Carducci does an excellent job galvanizing the relationships that we've had with our contractors. We are a district that we contract out entirely on transportation. So we've fostered longstanding working relationships that they're really partners with us. And when we were in this process last year, we were working and they were trying to work with us and renew contracts within the CPI. Unfortunately, just the ongoing challenges with the driver shortage and the driver crisis, coupled with fuel increases. We found out in the June timeframe that the far majority of our bids, we were going to have to go out to bid. So we went through multiple bids and down to negotiating, which is the process. If you bid twice and you reject them based on the numbers, then you're at a point where you can negotiate. So we did that. We went through multiple rounds of bids and we went through negotiations to contractors. We were able to secure it, but we secured it at a cost that impacted us in the current year of $1.9 million. over budget. Then the next month is when, so that was a September timeframe, and then in the next month in October is when the state released the increases in health benefits costs. So that's when we found out the great news about the increases of the 15.1%. So we were able to pivot and absorb those increases to budget in the current year, and we'll talk a little bit later about how that impacts the next year. But we were communicating and talking about this since then, and the challenges that was going to present, because although we were able to absorb it out of our current year utilizing undesignated fund balance as the terminology, it clearly was going to present an issue with this coming budget, because you had to account for that baseline increase. And that's really what we're talking about. There's always ebbs and flows every year. You have salary contractual increases that you must deal with. And it's, after you factor salaries and benefits, there's not a lot of discretionary funding. But the first two elements on these challenges is what we've been kind of working our best to kind of reduce and realize savings around that. So the next two are items that are always important to us: meeting existing and new state and federal mandates. It's always a challenge, which we very little have. We pretty much have no control with state or federal mandates. We just need to deal with implementing them and staying compliant with them. And then obviously it's always an ongoing challenge, and it's important to continue to protect and grow our future ready infrastructure.
So just some of the highlights from this year's budget that I just want to key in on. First is the supporting and expanding of curricular and co-curricular programs. Working to maintain our optimal class size, as we know that this is something that has been expressed to us on many occasions by our constituents as important. We also have new mathematics program adoption in grades 4 through 6, literacy in 3 through 5, and a new science program in grades 6 through 8. And in terms of the thought of like, well, perhaps that's discretionary. Well, school districts are required to do new adoptions every 5 years. And so these programs are now timed out and are required to be updated with new materials. We're also adding human resources to support student mental health and social emotional health, ensuring access to technology for all students, and augmenting instructional inclusion services for special needs students. Number of proposed investments, and these some of these are new. Some of them are simply reiterating investments that have traditionally been a part of the Holmdel Public Schools budget. The first is a new teacher evaluation platform, converting over from our current Genesis platform. This is essentially a budget neutral item, slightly higher, but basically budget neutral. I'm also continuing the district's existing practice of complementary testing reimbursement, which to date has been used exclusively for advanced placement compensation to students for taking their advanced placement exams. The courtesy busing, which is currently afforded to over 750 students in the school district, and which comes at a cost of approximately $500,000. We can continue to implement our hipster anti-bullying program, as well as our student threat and safety monitoring software. This is a really important tool that alerts us when troubling content is developed or written within our Google environment, and goes directly to our local law enforcement, to our administration, and enables us to intervene immediately in the event of a threat of self-harm or something of that nature. Also next year, implementing district-wide positive behavioral support programs, sometimes known as character education programs, so that we have consistent programs in all of our schools that are emphasizing the kind of standard normed values for all of our schools. Security upgrades. As the community is aware, we did undergo a comprehensive security audit this year. There were a number of recommendations that came out of that audit. And so to the greatest extent possible, we are moving forward with making some of those upgrades, including but not limited to completing our ballistic filming of our windows and a number of other upgrades. A man trap at Village School, which currently doesn't exist, and then redesigning the entryway to make it more secure at the high school. Our special 3 officer, by the way, oh, Joe, is Joe still here? I was just going to give him a thank you. One of our officers was here tonight. As well as instructional space renovation and repurposing. This is in particular at Village School. We continue to grow our preschool program, and we continue to have the need for repurposing instructional space at Village School. So this will connect to creating additional classroom spaces in that particular building. And finally, this budget also has a proposed investment of continuing to fund the SLEO3 officers and school resource officers for our schools. Now, before I talk about staffing investments, because members of the public and members of the board might find it somewhat, ill-advised or paradoxical that we'd be considering adding staff at a time of great fiscal challenge. And so I want to be clear on this particular slide that these staffing investments are at worst budget neutral, and actually may in some cases represent fiscal efficiencies for the district. And the way we're able to do that is that we've had 8 or 9 retirements this year. And our intention is not to fill those positions, but rather to work to try and backfill those and redeploy existing resources into these positions. But just to talk a little bit about the rationale for these requests, which came up to us through our department administration and our building principals. The kindergarten teacher is to ensure that the aforementioned class size, particularly in that first year in kindergarten, remains at an optimal level for the students and the teacher. It's to add a guidance counselor. Presently, our counselor to student ratio at the elementary schools is 2.5 times the recommended ratio of the American Association of School Counselors, which is approximately 250. We have approximately 800 students in our elementary schools and 1 counselor. So it's it's at least almost 2 times. This is actually is more like 2.5 times. Sorry, math was never my strong suit. Yeah, 250. Yeah, it's 250, right? Per counselor, right? Yeah, so we're well above it. And so this will be really critical, particularly at Indian Hill. As you know, our guidance counselors also serve, our school counselors also serve as our anti-bullying specialists in the school. They also participate in assisting with the administration of state testing. And so this is a really critical proposal, critical investment. The licensed clinicians, I think, require some discussion. So we've partnered with Rutgers University Behavioral Health Center and have had 2 clinicians that have been deployed in our district. They are Rutgers employees. We've funded them through ARP or American Rescue Plan, or I think it's through ESSER 3 or ESSER 2. It's been through grant money. And so as opposed to continuing to incur annual increases in that contract with Rutgers University, we've made the decision to propose to bring them onto our own staff. And this actually represents at worst budget neutral and maybe even a slight savings for the district to bring them into our staff as opposed to continue to contract through Rutgers. And obviously their value and benefit to our school district is immeasurable. They are frontline with working with some of our students in the schools that have some of the more, challenging mental health issues. It's super critical at this time. The special education teacher at SATS, amongst other things, will augment our programming and enable, in a general sense, will enable us to ensure that more of our students are able to stay home in their community schools, as opposed to attend out of district schools, which is not only wonderful for those students and those families, but also represents a savings for the district in out of district tuition. And finally, the math teacher is really to address an ever-growing class size at the high school, particularly in the Algebra 1, CP and Algebra 2 CP sections, which also tend to be the areas where our students benefit from the more hands-on approach. Those tend to be our areas when we look at our student achievement data, where on the high school level, we show the most need for improvement. And by bringing that class size down will aid in that process. We're also investing in our Schedule Bs. Now, Schedule Bs are extracurricular positions. Same caveat. When I start this slide, as I did with the original slide, is can we really afford to be adding extracurricular positions at a time of such serious fiscal challenges? And so I would tell you that the net investment here, after principals work to sort of redeploy collapsed, defunct positions, is approximately $15,000 in the scope of the budget to actually add these additional positions. I'd like to call particular attention to the bottom three, the 3 robotics club advisors. This is all really part of bringing about a more articulated sequence so far as engineering and robotics. We've done, Ms. McConnell and her team has done an outstanding job on the secondary level. And this is really an opportunity for us to expand that footprint into the elementary schools. And I think it really does, pay long-term dividends when we talk about retaining students long-term in our district. We also have academic investments. And this was alluded to previously, new programs, which are currently being piloted at Indian Hill and scheduled for implementation next year. This will ensure that our teachers have the most up-to-date assessment resources, print resources, technology to support the literacy and mathematics instruction that is going on the elementary and upper elementary level, as well as a new science program that ensures that our classroom instruction, that our teachers have the most up-to-date resources to ensure that our classroom instruction is well aligned with the next generation science standards. As well as new instructional technology platforms at the high school, namely to provide students with robust opportunities for drill and practice in the advanced placement courses, as well as for additional reinforcement of students enrolled in Math 8 and High School Algebra 2. Just to give you a little bit more color on that, differentiation of instruction on the secondary level can be challenging. And these resources that we put in the hands of teachers really enable teachers to bring about more of a small learning community approach in the high school classroom, where you can have a group of students that are on a bank of computers doing diagnostic work or reinforcement work on software. Teacher can be working with another leveled group that might need their assistance, and another group might be working collaboratively. So putting that instructional tool in the hands of the teachers is a really powerful way to facilitate their ability to differentiate in that secondary classroom, which is really important, particularly in Math 8 and Algebra 1, where students need that reinforcement. And I'm going to turn the microphone over back to Mr. Patrizio to talk about how, while managing some of the increased expenses and some of the expansions that we've talked about, the efficiencies that we brought to bear to balance the budget to the greatest extent possible.
Okay, so what we've done rather consistently from an administrative departmental or school-based budgets is primarily working on flat budgets. They have the ability to reallocate resources based on needs, just looking at current and prior years, but ultimately coming in kind of flat from flat with their current year. There are some administrators that go up slightly, others go down. It is a collaborative effort to work together to add initiatives or whatnot while maintaining this process that they work within. Yeah, and everything's are developed on a priority basis, where pretty much everything that's included in these budgets are top priorities. Efficiencies that we've demonstrated come with challenges to where kind of there's very little flexibility. But we do work together as a team to address needs when they need, as I mentioned before, state or federal mandates. You have to figure out ways to implement those and stay compliant while working off of these kind of budgets. So we do work together as a team to achieve those results. Backfilling 9 retirements, Dr. Kiscone had mentioned that earlier. That was important. We were taking advantage of those retirements and then not filling those positions and using existing staff to fill those roles. And also, as we mentioned before, utilizing these savings as well to backfill the new positions that you saw prior. So they're all coming or being funded from these savings from these retired positions. Our energy conservation program, we've done this many years back. I think we implemented this in 2018, 2008, maybe 2009. And when we started this program, early on, we were recognized nationally because we had reduced our energy consumption footprint by greater than 50%. It's important to note that program because that program over the years was a big part of how we were able to demonstrate efficiencies, as you saw on the previous slides, and putting forth these budgets that are under 2% while still investing in programs. A big part of that was the energy conservation program that we implemented and we still continue to maintain. Mind you, with the referendum, we expanded space, so we added square footage, and we're still managing that as much as we can to mitigate and realize efficiencies. Even though there are uncertainties with the markets in the energy and gas, we are keeping those line items flat because we believe through this program that we can continue to realize those efficiencies and not have an impact on those budget line items. It's important to note because we are open as much after hours as we are during the day for school because of all the recreational activities that go on. We did a study back when we implemented this plan, and we were able to identify down to the square footage what things cost us, and we've done a lot to mitigate those costs by adjusting our building service personnel schedules to where there's individuals working on Saturdays and Sundays, again, to mitigate and minimize overtime costs while still being able to have our facilities open for all the activities that go on after hours. So that is something that we're proud about, but we continue to focus on to maintain those efficiencies. And the last thing to note is this budget to ease the impact on the overall tax levy. We are utilizing $1 million of our maintenance reserve to fund this operating budget. We're comfortable doing that because of the success of the $40.3 million referendum that community supported and all of our ongoing proactive preventative measure efforts that we do to keep our facilities in good shape. So we believe we're comfortable doing that. And we're doing that not at the cost of something either, but it is important to note that we are utilizing $1 million from our maintenance reserve to help offset and fund the operating budget. Okay, so what does this all mean from a tax levy impact? Right now, we're looking at a net increase of $2.2 million or 3.88%. There's two elements that make up our total tax levy. The general fund side, which you see above, we're at 59 million or $2.6 million increase. But we're seeing a decrease in our debt service. That's a result of our old 2005 bonds that were refinanced in 2015. Those are being fully paid off. So when this fiscal year comes to an end, those are paid in full. As a result of that, we're seeing a decrease in our debt service obligation for on 40 of $376,000 for net increase. What's important to note is we only have one remaining bonds outstanding to pay, and that's the 2018 issuance. Those are 20-year bonds. So those are currently the only debt that we have. from our 23-24 going forward. And again, that would be paid in full in our 2037, 2038 year. That's when they come, they paid. So the net impact of those two elements is a 3.88% increase. It represents a total tax rate of $1.10 or 1.1036. The impact on the average residential assessed home in Homedale, which is at $907,000, is an annual increase of $474 or a monthly increase of $39.51. For any of those who are interested in calculating this on their own, you would go to your tax bill. You would go to the assessed value that's identified on your tax bill. You would divide that amount by $100 or 100, and then you would multiply it by the 1.1036, and that will calculate the school portion attributable to your tax bill. And then you can compare that back to your current value on your bill, and that's what you would show specifically the increase on yours. This is based on the average residential home. What's also important to note is we had shown in a previous slide 6 prior years of increases. So if you factor this 3.88 with the other 6, or look at it over 7 years, it's a net increase or an average of 1.7% over that span. Okay, so here are the components of the total budget, and we bring it down to this is how the Department of Education categorizes. So instruction, and there's several buckets that make up the $28.3 million. Instruction includes regular programs, special education, basic skills, bilingual education, school-sponsored co- and extracurricular activities, and athletics. The sum of all those elements come to $28.3 million. Then we have student support services, which is made up of health services, speech, OT/PT related services, child study team services, guidance, media library services, and staff professional development. That constitutes $8.4 million. Then we have tuition for out of district. That's for our general education students, our special education students, our students going to county vocational schools. We're seeing that totals 1.3. We're actually seeing a decrease year to year of roughly 200,000. And that's a result of students aging out, our special ed students that are aging out of the system or returning back to the district. The next item is school and central administration. That's roughly $3.6 million. Operations and maintenance, that is custodial, maintenance, ground services, security services, lunch and playground aids, and bus monitors come to the total of $6.9 million. Student transportation services, as we mentioned before, and draw a highlight to, that's $5 million, and that's generating just about a $1.7 million increase. It's important to note we able to bring that number down. As I mentioned earlier, we were at this year a $1.9 million increase. We were able to realize some efficiencies as we were moving this forward and brought that down to an impact of roughly 1.7. The next item is personal services, employee benefits. In the DOE's, the Department of Education, it's not just health benefits that is in this line item. It's health, which is the largest driving factor, but it's also FICA, it's PERS pension requirements, it's workers' compensation, it's tuition reimbursements, it's unemployment. You're seeing there's a variance of, or an increase of $1.17 million there. That what's driving that, the biggest portion of that is the increase in health benefits we referenced before. And then that's totals the total general current expenses of 66.3. And then it brings us over to the last piece, which is called total capital outlay / equipment. And we're seeing a decrease there. And that's a result of we utilize Monmouth County Improvement Authority for our lease of capital equipment. And we've been consistent as a district to participate in this program, I would say since the late 90s. and it's an every 2-year program. A lot of districts do not participate in it, which is interesting because it's an excellent way. That's one of the things that Monmouth County, the authority, does an excellent job. And we take advantage, and a bunch of municipalities take advantage. We take advantage of the AAA rated status. So we get extremely efficient interest rates. And we utilize this as our funding mechanism for predominantly our technology investments. So this is predominantly our significant funding mechanism for technology, and we also utilize it for our building services equipment and needs as well. The reason why it's going down is that represents the 2017 MCIA leases that were paid in full with this current year budget. So we're seeing that slight decrease there, and that's the reason for the decrease. And when you total it up, it comes to 66.7. And that's compared to our prior year, and that's what is the total of the overall budget that we're talking about this evening. The other piece worth breaking down is the revenue that makes up this budget. We've talked about the local tax levy in a previous slide. There are other elements that do make up and fund the budget. So we're talking the next one being state aid. As I mentioned earlier, our district has realized the benefit of this S2 change in funding. And all that means is for years we were managing being underfunded with state aid. So this year we saw another increase, which we were somewhat anticipating. You never know until they release those numbers, but that's been in line and consistent with what we saw the last 2 years. And certainly that helped soften the impact of what we were, the challenges we were dealing with this budget. The next item is extraordinary aid, and that's a number that's rather stays consistent. We don't find out what we actually realize in that aid until the year is over, and that's not always a guarantee on what that's funded and how much is funded. What that simply is for our special education students that have significant needs, and there's additional aid that comes as a result of that. Federal aid in semi, it's a smaller amount, but we certainly do what we need to realize this aid. There are plenty of districts that opt out of this because there's a lot of work that goes involved to submit the paperwork and stay compliance. Our position from the origins of this years back was, even though we were eligible based on our students, we never even considered not accepting these funds because every dollar counts. Fund balance. It's important to note, I mentioned that when we were talking about maintenance reserve, but what fund balance is a mechanism that that's available to you during the budget process, to where if you identify savings in your current budget, you can identify those and you can use it to fund a future budget. We traditionally have been at least at $2 million funding. As you can see, the previous year, we were at 2.1. But as I mentioned earlier, when we got hit with the challenges in our current year budget, the $1.9 million increase in transportation and the increase in health benefits, that although we were able to absorb it out of our current year, it was certainly going to impact our ability to fund next year's budget, to the point where we were only comfortable with 1.15 million. So how we made up for that extra million was utilizing the maintenance reserve, as I mentioned prior. We are comfortable utilizing that maintenance reserve, as I mentioned earlier. We believe that our facilities are in excellent shape, and it still provides us with roughly a $1.1 million maintenance reserve after this. And so that was an opportunity for us to soften the blow and the impact of this budget that we were dealing with. And then lastly, other revenue, which is made up of tuition that we receive for other local school districts. So we do have a very good special education program. We have an excellent director that does a great job working and communicating with other local schools. And that is, we have the ability to accept students that we can charge tuition for, and it's a win-win. It's a win for us. That's revenue for us. It's a win for those other local districts because it's more cost effective than them sending it to a private facility. So that's a portion of those monies, and then it's also facility rental that we charge and interest. And the sum total of those elements come to our 66.7, thus balancing out the budget.
So at this time, Mr. Petrizzi and I will join you back at the dais, and we're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gascon. Thank you, Mike. Sitting here for a number of years as a few of our board members, this is probably the hardest or the most challenging budget I've seen since I've been here. Couple of comments. I did have one question though, for Mike or Dr. Gascon. When you look at the proposed investments, repurposing Village School, what's a ballpark on that? Do we know a ballpark on that figure? Obviously, that's a one-time type expense, I presume.
Yeah, that's where the intention would be for that to come out of capital reserve.
Okay.
And I know that Mr. Stromslin has gotten some preliminary figures on that, but I have not had an opportunity to follow up with him. Michael, has he followed up with you on that project?
I mean, right now there's a rough estimate of roughly potentially about 125,000. We are going to submit for aid, which is available for that.
ROD grant.
We are going to apply for the ROD grant. We also have an opportunity to work with our enterprise program, our child care enterprise programs to offset on that cost, and there will be an operating impact once whatever remaining numbers are left. But we believe we're able to account for that based on what we'll be hopefully get in some ROD grant funding, and then also working with our enterprise program as well.
Thank you. And would you say on that same slide, courtesy busing roughly about $500,000, class 3 officers in the SRO worth about 350,000. That's about 850,000. That 500,000 represents about 10% of our total.
If I could just, if I may, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So, courtesy busing is roughly $500,000, and what we budget for our SRO and class 3 costs is $250,000.
Okay, so like $750,000. Okay. Well, first off, thanks for your guys' time. I mean, obviously, I know the board and for the public who's listening, we've been at this for the better part of the last couple of months. It doesn't end here. This is the not to exceed budget. So basically between now and the next 45 days to almost 60 days, that we continually working to find ways we can keep reducing this number down, because everyone who sits up here is a taxpayer. I certainly don't like to watch my taxes go up. I know the last few years we've been lucky that we've had a less than 0% tax levy. But the one thing I would talk about, or I'd like to talk about, is one thing, from the township or that Scott and Mike did not talk about, is the pilot funds that the district is not getting. So about 6 years ago or so, Bell Works happened. That they created a pilot program, which is payment in lieu of taxes. So all those dollars that are getting revenue from Bell Works, not $1 has gone to the district in the last 6 years. If we got a fraction of those dollars, this budget would be probably upside down, I would think. And I know Terrence has done a good amount of research and working with the town and has some numbers that he can provide, just so that the public, not many out there listening, and a few here in the audience, can understand what kind of revenues we're talking about that we're not getting. And hopefully, we're working with the township and the leadership there, that there might be some sort of shared services and savings and things that we could work together on that will help our budget. And, I'll ask Terrence if you could talk about some of those numbers.
Certainly. Before I share those figures, did you want to open up to the board if they had questions on the particular presentation they just heard? And then I'll get into the pilot revenues.
That's fine. Board members, open up. Sarika.
Yeah, I want to thank Scott and Mike for putting all this together. It's been a tough 1 week. It proves that we can't have it all. We have to pay for our services. A couple of things that I just want to say that I know sports got a lot of attention, and most of it was from the referendum. I hope we can sort of put a hold on it and as continuing, and maybe put more attention on the GNT funding, which still needs some funds. And one question to you, Pete, is that besides the pilot program, there's talk about the school security being covered by township for 250K, and there's some candidates that ran on that platform. So I was wondering whether you could, while you were the president, spearhead, just going and trying to get that done. So I want to know what your thoughts are.
Absolutely. We've been having ongoing conversations. Hopefully the township will get wind of our conversation here in the public, but we've had private conversations with the township administration. It's our hope that they can, and this goes back many township administrations, that they can pick up the class 3 officers and the school resource officer. It is school security or township security. So yes, we've been having those conversations, and I know along with Dr. Cascone, we're hopeful that they would at least do that. I would like to ask for more, because I think the district, based on the revenues that we know that are being realized, and we're not seeing any of them, I want more personally. But again, we don't control their budget. So, this is our budget right now. So I would almost have to assume this is what it can be. But hopefully they'll do the right thing, and they've been talking, and we can make something happen positively.
Before this budget, you think?
I hope so. I know we've had a couple of conversations with the administration that, hey, 60 days is, I know we can act pretty quickly sometimes. Hopefully they can act as quick as well.
So are you going to be the one taking it up? I just want to know.
We have, yes,
who's doing it.
we have, and their township committee finance committee met on Monday. They had a meeting the public meeting last night. There was no discussion on the budget or anything like that, but I know after now that we had this, we'll go back to them again, and they'll see the numbers, because this is public knowledge now. They'll see what the not to exceed number is, so they'll see where we have major problems. I mean, you could see the healthcare and the transportation; those numbers are massive. I mean, as long as I've sat here, we've never, we're really lucky, and kudos to our business office that we've had such a bank cap for the capital reserve and a maintenance reserve. If we hadn't been putting money into those accounts, this budget would be upside down again, even worse than it is right now. So yes, absolutely.
Good luck.
Starting tomorrow, or hopefully we hear back from them before us having to reach out to them. But they're well aware, because I know Dr. Cascone has been in their ear as well. So we'll continue.
Good luck.
Kim?
So I just wanted to say that in one of the committee meetings where we were discussing what to cut, I mean, it's a hard pill to swallow, I think, for all of us, having to increase the budget after twice not increasing it at all. That being said, when you look at what is in the budget that is really not necessary, complimentary testing, $100,000, courtesy busing, $500,000, the SROs, $250,000, right? These are things that are getting up to that, maybe you can cut a point off. And when you look at what a 1% decrease is, it's so negligible that to put kids' safety at risk, or to cost, it was like $130 for the year for the average household, based on that 905,000, or $11 a month. And yet you could be costing now a parent having to do prime time that to maybe double that in every month, versus the whole year paying the $130 a household. So just know that it's hard, it's a little difficult for all of us. And but when you think about where you can make the cuts, it's not something I think at least for me, it's not something that in the long term is worth it. So I mean, this was a lot of work and a lot of kind of digging in, and I appreciate it, everybody.
Thank you, Kim. And the other thing I know we've discussed as a board is none of us think this is sustainable. I don't have a magical, what next year holds. I mean, I don't know if Mr. Petrizzo or Dr. Cascone, if we, talk about from healthcare benefits and transportation, would we expect them to keep going up? Would we expect them to be flat, or do we just not know? I mean, just like the school calendar last month, last year's calendar isn't this year's, and last year's budget isn't this year's, and it's certainly not next year's. But it's definitely a concern of mine. I know if, taking from bank cap, normally we're lucky enough to, we put money back into bank cap each year, almost like we're saving some money. I don't know if there's any comments on what we might see the future to be, or do we not know?
IP, can I still statement? This is Linda.
Yes, Linda, we can hear you.
Yeah, sure. I think regarding what's a school for, right? The school for is for the students. If without students, we don't need a school. So when we talk about where we should cut, the first thing we think cut for students expense, I think we're on the wrong direction. So we are all be here doing this. Everything is for students. I just want to say this is statement. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott, Mike, if you guys had any,
I was just to respond up here. I certainly can't speak to health benefits. Transportation, I can tell you this, you know, even with this budget, as I told you, we're our contractors are working with us to try to hold. We actually came down from what we experienced this year. You know, CPI is 5.89%. And we weren't talking about that with our contractors. I want to stress that we very fortunate that we do have excellent working relationships with our contractors. So that does help and help us. And again, Lara and Paula and Jeff, the team, they do an amazing job. Lara Carducci, Paula Rico, Jeff Reynes, they do an excellent job in managing those areas and working with our contractors. You know, the fuel costs goes up, goes down. That's an element. The real ongoing challenge is the driver shortage. It's very frustrating because unfortunately, this was another self-inflicted wound from the state when they changed the CDL requirements. So it's again, another frustrating example of a change that was, I don't know why this change was made several years back, but what transpired, essentially what they did is they put a lot of mechanical expectations on drivers to be able to know their way around an engine and whatnot. And what that ultimately had happen was a lot of these drivers that drove for many years, they were retired workers or whatnot. They just wanted to stay active. They gave their licenses up. They didn't want to deal with the concern or exposure. And this is, we're not the only ones. This is a statewide problem. So the answer to you is that's still the unknown, because to me, that has not gotten better. It's still a challenge. And what was happening is you had drivers, they probably never been more valued in their services at any time. And it's a bidding war. And you have them jumping, going from one contractor to another contractor to get an increase. So that I still see is out there, and that's going to still be an ongoing challenge.
thank you, Mike. Chris?
Sure. I'd like to share some comments. Being new to this, couple of months in, this was a lot to wrap my head around. I spent a lot of time going over a lot of these line items. I appreciate Mr. Patrizzo and Dr. Cascone answering a lot of the questions and validating a lot of these operating expenses. I know we can say, and I appreciate all the time and being proactive to help mitigate a lot of these out of control expenses, but just looking at this coming in fresh, and I know we can say that there hasn't been increases the last 2 years. I know that we can say that there are expenses out of our control. We're talking about transportation and the benefits going up. But the reality of the situation is, after I looked at this, is we either have a lot of tough decisions to make now, or we're going to have tougher decisions to make in the future, because we all want to provide the best for these children as much as possible. And part of that is being responsible financially. We must. So we do need to talk about Homedale's future and protecting Homedale's future. And unfortunately, that does come with a lot of tough decisions to make. And those are decisions I'm not sure what they are. I'm learning, and I know everybody's working together on that. But I think it's important to note we can't just look at what we're doing today. There's a lot of macroeconomic conditions that are dismal right now. It looks brutal out there. There's banks imploding. So we need to keep all these factors in mind right now. And I think that's very important for all of us. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Terrence?
Sure. Thank you, Board President. Within the scope of about 5 minutes, I'm going to explain a couple of different figures and numbers and how the interaction is with the Township Committee, which is a new committee a hardworking committee who, by the way, have a fantastic financial team with the CFO and one of their, Eric Silvergold is here. He's on one of the financial committees. They're crafting their budget right now. They'll be introducing it on or about March 28th, or the meeting subsequent. And it's important to have that partnership. Each year is different, but I think we have a great opportunity to have partnership, whether or not something comes together this year in time for the budget. I'm going to explain exactly how that can happen. And I think it should happen in some form, although others may have a different opinion, and that's okay too. But I think you just need the facts and to understand the dollar figures, because we are talking about it's kind of scraping at the edges, whether you're capping the number of AP tests. Right now it's unlimited. We used to do 0. Okay, it's just from a historical perspective with a very good reputation, we reimburse 0. We started that a couple of years ago. Many folks weren't aware that it was unlimited. Perhaps there may be a cap, but again, you're only talking about a smaller dollar figures. On the transportation issue, I'll just put out again, for folks who follow the conversations of the Board of Ed, if you modify the high school start times to about 8:15, not only will you have more parents using the public transportation because the bus stops will be in the daytime, you will also have lunch periods that aren't 10 o'clock. They'll be at an actual lunchtime, and you'll be able to rebid those transportation routes. And my understanding is from the folks in that field, save significant dollars to the taxpayers, including giving the children what the psychologists say is a better circadian rhythm, better biology, and I'm sure that ties to improved social, emotional, mental, behavioral health. So to me, that's a simple thing that we hopefully will talk about more. On the health insurance legislation, if you follow that, that's in a tailspin. The assembly was very successfully rolled by the NJEA, give credit where credit was due. They unanimously passed a bill that they are now wiping the egg off their faces because the numbers are blowing up. Frankly, just as I said they would. What's happening is new plans were mandated, but the trend, the health insurance trend used to be if the premiums went up, the cost share was shared by the taxpayers and the folks who make the schools run and work every day, the dedicated folks that are here in the room today. They changed that so the premium was fixed to a percentage of the employee's salary. Fantastic for the folks who represent the employee groups. I mean that sincerely. For the taxpayers, they're eating all the future trend. So the 15.3% that goes up, the taxpayers are eating that trend, and they'll continue to eat that trend, and it is not sustainable. So the Trenton is in a flurry of conversations right now. The municipal side is blowing up, and the state health benefits plan is going into what's called a death spiral. I think 28 local school and municipal units have already bailed out of the state health benefits plan, including Trenton itself. If that doesn't tell you, if that's not a harbinger of what's to come in this death spiral, and what do I mean by that? Adverse selection in insurance means that the healthy groups bolt for lower premiums, either by self-funded plans or other private fully insured plans. The sick groups stay, the rates spike again, the sicker groups stay, the healthier groups leave, and it collapses on itself. There was a meeting I was involved with where they were looking to plug it with $350 million, I think it was. You had entities from all sides of the public sector realm, union and non-union, union and management, all concerned about it, and nothing happened. So you're going to see more financial problems there. You're going to see more trouble, I would say. So keep your eyes on that, both from the union side and the management side. But they're going to have to fix that and deal with that as well before the system collapses, which is really, in my view, is that you'll be reading about that within
Terrence,
6 to
can I
8
interrupt
months.
you for 1 second, just to say, as the union member on the board, I personally believe that you go to a store and something's missing a tag. They don't ask you what your salary is before telling you how much it costs. And if the price should be the price, should be the price, and the shared piece of that should be the shared piece of that. So just personally, like, I'm all about, it should be a fixed percent cost, not based on salary, like a percent of salary, and not based on, and I do 100% agree with you that it is definitely imploding. So, and it's, we all know it, that it's happening. So
The groups that can leave are leaving. The groups that can't leave are staying. So then what happens with Aon, I believe, is going to score it again. They'll have the rates, they'll come out in August. they're expecting another spike, and Trenton is already talking about pushing money into the system to stabilize it, which is how they used to stabilize it in the past, to bring groups on and to keep them out of the private market. Government does not do it very well. That's really the message on there.
So
let's get-
Terrence, the groups that are leaving, where are they leaving to?
They're,
Because it's untenable.
they're
So what are
self-
they doing?
Well, you have all the major players: AmeriHealth, Blue Cross, Oxford, United Healthcare, Aetna.
Are they
they're going-
more viable? That
Oh,
are they?
well, it depends. It
Are-
depends on your loss ratio. So, for example, if you have a municipality, one that I'm familiar with, has a loss ratio that's say 110%. That means for every dollar in premium, $1.10 is going out in claims. So they can't leave at that moment, because to go to a private carrier, they're not going to get a better rate. But if you have a company, rather a public entity, where the loss ratio is 90% or 80%, a carrier goes in there, underwrites the case, says, you know what? For the money that they're paying, there's 20% of room, for example, in administrative cost, profit, and that kind of thing. And then they look into the individual claims. They see if there are any shock claims, high claims, what the group population looks like, the demographics look like, and they may give you a proposal that saves you millions of dollars, right?
Yes,
And I
just
think-
all I'm saying is that healthcare costs are exploding in every area. As such, it's a problem, whether it's for teachers, for private payers, or anybody,
Yeah.
right?
So so let's talk about some serious dollars. Yeah, the local numbers. So going local now, as folks know, anyone who lives here now or grew up in Homedale, as I did, and many of the folks in here did, Lucent was traditionally a solid rateable in town, both for the schools, the town. The county has their share, small portion open space tax. And it then became a functionally obsolescent building for those in that industry. And the township committee smartly moved to look at a redevelopment option for the plan. So there are different opinions on that, but that's not the purpose of this conversation. They created a redevelopment plan. They chose a redeveloper, and they chose to design a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes. And the payment in lieu of taxes as opposed to normal tax assessing. So if you're a regularly taxed property, there's a portion that goes to the school, let's say 65%. I mean, you could pick that number, 62, 63, in that general range is, I think, about right. And the school, the town collects it, but the school would receive their share, what I'll call a traditional share. So the redevelopment plan that was designed a number of years ago fixed a payment in lieu of taxes. Great for the developer, cost them less, but they could also fix a budget number, so they're not. It's able to be easier to be budgeted. But the way the statute is, unless the municipality, and this goes to what a potential solution is, if the organization chose to move forward with this, a local municipality can pass an ordinance to share revenue with the school. The statute essentially gives the county 5%. Typically, the school does not receive any revenue unless there is an ordinance that assigns a portion of the revenue to it. And that's essentially it. But if no action is taken, there's no revenue to the school. So what happens essentially is the school subsidizes the municipality. And the town is, now it's the same taxpayer, okay? It's all the same households, taxpayers. But the town has been able to have fantastically flat budgets. And I want to share with you why. The pilot revenue, I did the calculations, they're not complicated to do. In 2018, the revenue was $621,137.52. The revenue in 2019, $3,060,463.03. In 2020, the revenue to the municipality, the township, $4,548,430.03. And the last 2 years, I have 2021. The revenue is $4,986,169.26. You're probably noticing this begins to add up. And in 2022, the finance team is very conservative. They do a fantastic job. They budgeted 3.8 million or so, which is a very conservative number. I'm not sure what the final number is, but I'm assuming it's about 5 million or more. So what's the point? If an ordinance in a similar municipality that I'm familiar with, and I was involved with this project, were in place here, the school would receive in the past from 2018 to 2022 approximately $10 million. million, 10 million. So that's a lot of AP tests, right? So then the question is, well, is there something that makes sense, or is there something that's reasonable as far as the traditional ratable model? And again, a number of the township committee folks, they're new, so they don't work with this field day to day, and so they're determining what they wish to do, and they have their own budget and they have their own expenses and things that they need to work with. But for example, if you just had a $5 million ratable, rather pilot revenue, and you had what I'll call the traditional percentage, and I'll just use 65%, we would have 3.25 million to plug into this budget. So I'm not a math pro, but that's why I'm bringing this up to the board president of the board, so you at least understand the numbers regardless of where this journey goes. We would have an additional 3.25 million right now for this budget. So if you cut it in half the traditional ratable, you would have approximately 1.625 million available for this budget. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So just make sure I understand. So this property, even under pilot or even under traditional tax way of paying taxes, there's no ordinance in place for us to get anything.
No, this would be a discussion the township committee would think about, and they would ultimately, what I would suggest is that we pose the question, and it's a yes or a no, and if it's a no, it's the end of the discussion for this year. And if it's a yes, it would be to the extent to which there's a reasonable figure, that because it's all coming to the same taxpayers, right?
But notwithstanding their deal, whatever it is, pay in lieu of tax or regular taxation, there's either way, there's nothing.
No, there's no, and to be fair, there's no legal obligation.
Right. No,
There's no legal obligation, right? So those are some of the numbers, or if you just fixed it at 10%, there would be an additional $500,000 a year. Now, so you have an option one is it stays the same. The township committee says, well, look, thank you for that information. We considered it. We looked at our budget figures and what we constructed, and it's not something that can move forward at this time. Okay, that's one answer. The next answer is, yes, we do feel that something would be appropriate based on the fact that the Lucent ratable traditionally was designed to fund the entire school municipal operations, and that regardless of the statute that disenfranchises the district, that municipalities such as Cranford have ordinances that did apply revenue. And you'd say, okay, Cranford, well, what's the ordinance? What did it say? The first 2 years, it was 70%. So year one, 70% of the total revenue. Year two was 70% of the total revenue. And the years 3, 4, and 5 were 55% of the total revenue. And that goes back to where my 10 million number comes from, because the actual number is, call it 9.5 million, but not 9,000. 9 million, 9.5 million or so. And that's just applying an ordinance. It doesn't mean that that should be the ordinance. Maybe it's a 10% ordinance. And now you could also have a program where working with leadership and the full board with the township committee of having it project oriented. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, for example, maybe it's the lights at the turf field that will be underutilized in September unless it has that lighting, the conduit is already there. Or perhaps it's traffic improvement projects that are identified, ingress and egress with SATs that desperately needs it, as well as the high school to get in and out of these schools. So moving away from sports, for example, move to capital improvements. And that would require easements or other property acquisition by either the county and municipality to fix those traffic choking areas when parents and families are trying to get in and out of the schools. So maybe that's a targeted capital project, because the town would need to be the lead agency on a capital project anyway, and it would end up being a joint project anyway, another one might be historic preservation of the matriarch of Homedale, Adeline Holmes Lubkert, her home. Rehabilitating that space, perhaps it's tied to the arts and the Duncan Smith Theater. Duncan Smith, who graduated, was Homedale High School, and Krista Smith, who I graduated with. That historic structure. And by the way, if those folks weren't here, we wouldn't have this property where this building sits on. So for the folks who aren't familiar with history, that little white house has a heck of a lot of history that ties to the name of this town and also the property on which this building sits that we're in right now. So to the extent that it's not just some old house, that it could be tied to the arts and tied to perhaps a transitional folks that are aging out of the system and to be able to do different kind of work study programs in there. Maybe that's a project that's identified. Another one may be identifying the specific safety improvements. So those are the numbers. And whatever one's opinion is on those numbers, they're significant. And there is a mechanism to come together. So in conclusion, how is it done legally? That's very simple. The township committee decides on a figure. They introduce an ordinance. The calculations that are done and the budget that's not completed yet, it's not introduced yet, are included in that calculation. The ordinance is passed on first reading. That may be in April, perhaps. The ordinance is set for a public hearing, which is how it functions in municipal government. So there'd be a second reading, a public hearing, and it would then be if there was support from the township committee, whatever the figure is, putting that aside, but whatever that number may be, then that would be passed at a second reading. And with that type of information, the town budget can include that partnership of restoring the traditional rateable structure of the Lucent property, now known as Bellworks, vis-a-vis the pilot and having an ordinance. And then we would be able to, with the county, be able to include those funds, whatever they may be, in the budget. So that's the short story. That's the mechanism. And I'll just say that regardless of the outcome of the discussion, we appreciate the hard work of the township committee, their finance committee. They're doing a lot of hard work. I stopped by last night to strongly suggest some legal mechanisms to save the horn antenna and that property there, and the ability for us to launch a collaborative STEAM. I spoke there as an individual, not as a board member, a STEAM program with that Nokia project. That's a very, very simple acquisition. And I think that the board and the township, that's another area, just a minor tangent, an incredible area of partnership with the history of literally the universe right there in Homedale. So thank you for listening, and I hope you feel that you got a reasonable update on significant dollars that are available.
Thank you, Terrence. And just to close the loop on it, when they started the pilot project 6-7 years ago, there was commitments, handshake deals, winks, nods, whatever you want to call it, that funding was going to come to the school district. Here we are 6-7 years later and it hasn't come. So we're still working. I know the board members have been on here for a bunch of years. We've been trying to work it, but like Terrence said and others have said, it's up to the town. If the town says no, that's the answer. But at least we want the public to be well aware of, a lot of this stuff the budget would look entirely different if there was some shared savings, things like that. So
in the prior years, did you give them specific things to pay for, or was it just a certain dollar amount or percentage? Because Terrence, that was great that you added that, because without that, just to throw a percentage or a number, probably going to be a tougher sell. But talking about security officers,
for years we've been asking class 3 officers and SRO for at least 5 years.
Yeah, so just as a matter of reference, so since they've started generating, as Mr. Wall just referenced, in 2018, when they started realizing revenue and pilot, if you just take it from that point forward, when this year comes to an end, our fiscal year in June 30th, during that same time, we will have paid the township $1.3 million in security costs over that same period of time.
And board president, can we just close the loop from the board members? Is there an interest in board leadership or through administration to formalize a request so we can receive an answer, be it affirmative or negative? Is there consensus or interest to go ahead and review that and communicate in writing to the municipality a request that fits in with what your view may be?
Eileen, you had something to say.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone's in
I
disagreement,
think Eileen's had some experience
Yeah,
with this,
please.
so.
Chris, to your question, yes, they have been asked for specific things. It has not been vague. It has been very face-to-face communications in meetings, sitting down together. So there has been no vague kind of misunderstanding about the board looking for them to assist. It's been very clear, and it's happened yearly, as Pete said, for as long as him and I have been on this board. So it has been a consistent request. Yes.
If it has been a consistent request, then we can continue to be consistent, I guess, maybe with some better methods that Pete will think of. But I think the security would be a good thing to add as a project. And maybe walkways, making it safer for children to walk to school, that might then tie in with our courtesy bus problem. So unless that's solved, maybe you can include those two. That's what I would think. But I don't know what we should do to make them consider this if they didn't consider it before.
Yeah, so tying into what Sarika just said, Mike Sacco was a huge proponent of getting the township to consider putting more sidewalks in so that people could more easily get to school, walking, perhaps bike riding. I mean, that was something that Mike talked about literally every year since he was on the board. And he came to both township meetings and board meetings and was very vocal about that. So that also has been on the table for quite some time.
I would just say, Board President, the Township Committee is basically brand new. You're essentially communicating with a new company, a new organization, a new CEO, a new board. So I think that the efforts in the past are fantastic. They didn't resonate with the members that were there at that time. And we have an entire new organization that now has the opportunity to share their thoughts. So perhaps, I think that it's, kind of honoring the past efforts, also understanding that the Township Committee has wholly transformed itself. And it would be a fresh request to a new group of leaders, and then they could decide anew and start with the fresh question and put it, I would strongly suggest putting it in writing.
I was just gonna say.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, exactly. I think if anything, what we can do is just a formal letter. Like you said, it is a brand new township committee. Formal letter, put it out there, deliver it to them, and then obviously, see if they respond, or I believe they will. I think like Terrence said, it's a new group there. And I think we've had meetings with them already and they've been open to it. Like I said, they had the finance committee meeting on Monday. I know this was one of their topics, was going to be on their agenda type thing, and then talk with the whole committee. So I know it's definitely it's in their purview, it's on their radar. Just in that matter of now back up what's been said, and help fund some of the stuff. I mean, if there's ever a year that the school district can use some help, this is one of those years. I mean,
I appreciate Mr. Silvergold stopping in today, so that way you're able to hear it right from the dais. So thank you for that.
Is that going to be specific to the security officers? I just want to be candid too.
I think we'd ask for more, get less, right?
Yes, we can, but we also want to get what we realistically think.
Well, I'm going to be candid too, just to put it out there, because I have been speaking to members of the community to get gauge, and there are difference of opinions on this. All right. There's a lot of taxpayers who feel the schools are not obligated to anything. They already eat up 65% of the budget. So we have to listen to all those taxpayers as well. And that's why I think we need to be specific with certain items like the security officers or the sidewalks, things from a safety perspective, where they would be more inclined to support us. But if we just go in looking for a particular number, I don't think we're going to do well. And obviously past history proves we haven't. So I'll partake in any of the discussions if you want other board members involved, but I think we really need to be very specific with not only what we want the money for, but how much it is and what we're going to use it for.
No, we've been very specific. We've been asking for the same, you want to say Christmas wish list, class 3 officers and security officer, thinking, okay, this shouldn't be something that the district pays for. And specific can be in writing, and Mike just went over what the 5-year costs have been. And we'll keep asking. I mean, to me, that's the bottom line. That's the small. From there, then ask for other things. I mean, but yeah, I think a formal letter will start and have another conversation and keep the conversation going.
Thank you.
I would just like to say also, so I think part of this whole thing, step 1, talking to the township for this coming budget, but looking forward to the 24-25 budget, I want to put it on the table that we really need to discuss and give administration the lead time to put the complex on one schedule. So apparently now is too short of a time. I've had a very nice conversation with Dr. Cascone. on a weekend night, so I appreciate your time, where, you know, we discussed that at this point, it's not enough lead time for September 1. But if they could, if they know from us, the board and the community, that we're looking for to have the complex on one schedule and that that's something that we definitely want to move forward to, they can start planning it July 1, but it is quite a process to undertake. And then we could look at starting that for the 24-25 year. So I think we need to really discuss that, and that could, like Terrence mentioned, to me, that's going to save possibly staffing, but the biggest thing is the transportation, because those empty high school buses are now going to include SAT students, and we'll be able to cut those routes. Well, you could still, instead of, yes, you could do a double tier, but you could make it triple tier, which apparently the bus companies like, according to Mr. Patrizzo. They like the triple tier because it keeps them busy all day. Yes, it does too. So as a parent that has kids at Indian Hill and Village that dismiss at the same time, that's difficult. And so there's your third tier. Just, you know, push those times, or you stay the double tier. But if we're looking to really do that and try to save that revenue, even if it is for the 24-25 budget, I think we have to decide that as a board so that we give.
I fully support that initiative.
Yep.
So just for the board's knowledge, so board will of course move into their committee of the whole format in April. It is the administration's intention to bring forward just an informational presentation for the board and the public on just the various options for that, you know, what the implications would be, the costs, etc. So that'll be a good public conversation where we can wrap our heads around it, and the community for that matter.
Thank you, everyone. Good conversation. Now let's shift gears a little bit, since we have our student reps here, and that's sort of what we're here for, the students. Do you guys want to give your student report?
Yes, thank you. To start off, the Holmdel Theater Guild will be performing its newest production, The Addams Family, this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night at 7 p.m. in the Holmdel High School auditorium. The National Art Honor Society will also be opening its arts exhibition in the lower high school commons this Friday night at 7 p.m. Additionally, Holmdel's annual district concert will take place next Tuesday, March 21st at 7 p.m., showcasing student musicians from Indian Hill, SATS, and the high school. We hope that the community will attend all of these events to support the district's arts and music programs. The 2023 HHS Film Festival was also announced this week, and an interest meeting available to all HHS students will be hosted tomorrow, March 16th, during the second half of unit lunch in the TV studio. And for some class of 2023 specific news, a Google form for senior prom DJ song requests was released on Monday, so please make sure to fill in your favorite songs. And to the many seniors who continue to await and receive their regular college decisions, please make sure to update your statuses on Naviance and send your commitments to the class of 2023 decisions Instagram page. Thank you, and I will now hand it over to Anu to complete the student report.
This week, although technically short, has felt very long, with the 11th graders having their standardized testing for the NJ GPA yesterday and today. Nonetheless, the junior class is thankful to our teachers and administration for making it almost bearable. Also, we are all excited for our potential day off this Friday. Continuing with this positive note, spring sports have also started this week. Moving on, the Student Advisory Board is currently having a fundraiser called Sealing Your Legacy to paint the ceiling tiles of the school, which started today and it will end this Monday. Ceiling tiles are $30 each. All the classes are also selling t-shirts for Battle of the Classes, and students must have the shirt if they want to participate in the activities. The sale for the shirt ends March 30th on the Aqua Rose site. Another deadline to keep an eye out for is the junior prom contract, which is due March 30th. In addition, Project Graduation is having a fundraiser for all grades, which includes the senior walk t-shirts for the class of 2023 to the class 2037, new Holmdel drawstring bags, and graduation lawn signs. Lastly, the Animal Welfare Club is looking for donations such as dog or cat food, leashes, bowls, treats, and toys to help local shelter animals. There's a donation box located near the School Resource Officer Station. Thank you, and this concludes the student report for tonight.
Where are you painting tiles? Do you know? I'm just curious, so like, it's like a tile, like, like a drop ceiling tile or,
Yeah, like ceiling tiles like in the hallway.
okay. Cool. Any questions for our student reps? I see one.
Not a question,
Oh,
but
comment.
we do have a Rutgers Business School acceptance, so congratulations, even if it's not where you go. Because I know you're still awaiting, but it's always nice to just have one yes. So congratulations.
Thank you again. Report of the superintendent? If you have one tonight, I know it's.
President Reddy, I'm withholding my March superintendent's report till the March 29th meeting.
Thank you, sir. How about HIV report?
As presented.
Same.
I submit the reports as presented in closed executive session.
All right, committee reports we have done, and brings us to the questions or comments from the public on action items only. So, one. Sir? You just state your name and address, please.
Hi, good evening. Daniel Lahaj, 34 Roberts Road. A couple of years ago, I brought up a suggestion of getting cameras on the school buses, dash cams. I think it would help with aggressive driving in the morning during pickups and drop-offs in the afternoon. It seems like a relatively inexpensive technology to request for the transportation companies to put on each bus. And also I wanted to thank the superintendent, the board, and the principals for some of the great workshops that were offered for parents during the school year, namely a couple of weeks ago from Mr. Cranford on cyberbullying and one earlier in the year on the dangers of vaping and smoking. They're very pertinent, and they help reinforce the values parents are trying to teach their kids at home. And they're really great presentations. Thank you.
Thank you. On your comment on buses, cameras in the buses, sometimes a challenging thing for the district. I'm sure the business administrator can talk to it, obviously, since we don't own the buses, but we can always recommend and ask the different busing contractors that we've had and money we've had for years to do that. I don't know, if Mike, if you know if any of the buses have cameras or it's sort of like a hodgepodge in terms of some do, some don't.
The majority of them do have them. Some of the challenges, sir, is how they work. My understanding is you're not allowed to idle the buses anymore, so they run when the bus is running. So when it's shut off, sometimes the cameras are off, but they're moving more towards I think all having them. But we'll certainly follow up and make it a point of confirming that they do have it. But the far majority of them do have them, from my understanding. But we'll certainly follow up with our transportation team and make sure that that's something that is a point of focus going forward.
But aren't the cameras not as a dash cam? They're actually to see this, what's happening on it's on the students to make sure that safety is happening.
It's
not as a dash cam.
It's not a dash cam. Yeah. There is a camera though, but and I don't. Some have more than, but we'll find out exactly. Which contractors have what.
Thank you, Mike. I see no other comments. We'll move on to action items. So, guess we'll be voting on numbers 1 through 5. So if I could get a motion on those. Move. Do we need a second?
Move.
Got a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, Mike.
Mr. Reddy.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Wall. Yes. Mrs. Briamonte.
Yes.
Mrs. Zhang.
Yes.
Dr. Kalor.
Yes.
Mrs. Tassilo.
Yes.
Mr. Buckley.
Yes.
Mr. Damari.
Yes.
Mr. Mann.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Any old business? Eileen?
Actually just want to thank Dr. Cascone and Mr. Patrizzo for all the work they did with this budget. It's a very long process. The budget is extensive, to say the very least, and we have 3 new board members who always have access to the both of them with their questions. I do believe they gave them lots of questions and things to ponder, and they've been really good about getting back to everybody and filling them in and trying to provide that level of education, especially for the new board members. So again, I just want to thank them for all the work and effort they put into this budget and for helping our new board members and likely going to continue to help all of the board members going forward.
Thank you, Eileen. Any other comments? New business. Done. This is good. Usually this meeting goes faster than this, but this is a longer. I will say, I don't know, Dr. Cascone didn't talk about it, but be remiss if we didn't. We had our first annual transition fair, so thank you to Amanda over there. I think she was very involved with that. Understand it was a pretty big success. So Dr. Scott, I know you were there if you want to.
Yeah, thank you, President Reddy. Yeah, it was, listen, all the credit goes to Mrs. Lemoglia and her team, staff in the transition, the STARS program. It was, and Board Member Damari, who has an office there, who was helpful in facilitating some conversations. It was, we couldn't have asked for a better space. It was a great turnout of agencies and prospective employers, schools. And really, we talk a lot about, this idea of college and career readiness and providing students with opportunities to facilitate that next move. And this was a great example of a really outside of the box and innovative program for our 18 to 21 students in what is a tremendously momentous transition for them and for their parents. And I know that I'm sure that they appreciated and found it constructive. So very well done. Thank you, Mrs. Lemoglia.
I'd like to add too, they represented the Homedale School District very well, and a lot of pride and a lot of passion out of that special services team. They're an impressive group. It was fun to watch, and no hiccups for the first annual. So great job. I also wanted to piggyback on what this gentleman said too, if that's okay. Just briefly, I think this school administration is doing a great job. Also, what I've liked over the last week or so are some of these workshops where the younger students are able to hear and be inspired by the older students. The language arts fair was well attended, very, very good night. The Homedale Theater Guild had an open house, which was great, and I was able to attend both of those. And if we can continue to increase having these older students guide the younger students by being able to see them, hear them, and it takes down the intimidation factor for these younger students going into the next school, especially from Indian Hill to SAT. So I really do appreciate seeing that, and I hope we can continue to do more of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Totally agree. Any other new business? All right. See none. Any questions or comments from the public? All right. See none. We do not have to go into executive session, so I think we're done for tonight. Thank you everyone for coming. Oh, we need a motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you very much. Have it all in favor? Aye. Have a nice night.